Admiral, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Cooper, thank you, distinguished members. Thanks for allowing us to come here today as we talk about this critical mission set. You know, as I look at threats to the homeland, I look at threats from the most likely to the most dangerous, and right there in the middle of this is this critical mission set defending the homeland from ballistic missile defense, particularly the threats from North Korea and Iran. But as I look at the threats, the most likely and the most dangerous that's getting ready to confront us, I think it's sequestration and the impacts on my ability across all of my mission sets, but particularly in this particular case to defend the homeland. Sequestration, when it comes to for the services, it's the quickest way to hollow a force out. They have to take it out of readiness, and they're going to delay capability. And when I look at the effects of sequestration on this mission set, my good friend here, Jim Syring, he doesn't have a readiness account that he can go to. He has to go into the New START program, which is going to delay the long-range discriminating radar, the improved kill vehicle that we need to outpace this threat, proliferating threat. And so the specifics of that, of those impacts, I'll leave to Jim here. But we look forward to your questions, and we really appreciate your support.
I want the focus of this hearing to be mainly on the implications that these spending caps on defense will create if we go forward with them. I think that the Budget Control Act is one of the most irresponsible things the United States Congress has done in recent memory. Specifically, the caps that it's hoisted on the Defense Department. I would remind everybody that the year before the BCA was adopted, this committee had voluntarily cut over $500 billion out of the Defense Department just to show our recognition of the financial burden that this country was suffering. And then we had no idea there'd be another $600 billion coming behind it the very next year. And it's those two things together is what really has created this mess that we're in. But while the members of this committee, the full HASC, as well as this subcommittee, I think, all are fully aware of the implications of these continued irresponsible cuts, I think it's important for y'all as service members to help describe for the members who are on this committee who will be reading about this hearing exactly what these cuts mean to your ability to continue to defend this country in an effective way. So with that.
Sir, if I can, let me start back in the first round of sequestration back in 2013 when those cuts came down mid-year when we were under a continuing resolution. Those cuts had an immediate impact in what we were doing. And I have many, many contracts across the agency that require annual funding, and if I didn't want to break those contracts, I immediately had to go into areas that I could affect, and I went to testing. And I deleted several tests or delayed several tests. The GAO has noted this, and I would say that's a direct result of the sequestration cuts that came down. In addition, I took further risk on the SM-32A development program and essentially removed all of the development margin in that very important program that must deliver that missile in 2018 to support the Poland deployment. Critical effort. We're now out of margin, so we're now into the projection of what next in terms of the hypothetical, not even hypothetical, the real possibility of sequestration cuts flowing down to the Missile Defense Agency. There was a number mentioned yesterday in the Appropriations Committee hearing of 18%, which would mean that I would take a reduction from $8.1 billion to $6.7 billion, over a $1.4 billion reduction. Again, if I maintain my commitment to 44 GBIs by 17, which is our top priority, and the EPAA commitments that we've made in Europe, there's not many places to go. So we would immediately go to the efforts that were started last year, which are the redesigned kill vehicle and the long-range discriminating radar, approximately $500 million between those efforts. That would immediately put those on hold or delay those. And to me, now you're starting to jeopardize our future capability in terms of what we're able to say to the American people and our ability to defend the homeland. With the development and testing that I see going on with North Korea very specifically, and the pace and the progress that they're making, I'm in serious jeopardy of, without those improvements, of going to the NORTHCOM commander and advising him that the system is overmatched. That would be the path that we're on if we don't do these improvements between now and 2020. The system will be overmatched.
Apart from these urgent sequestration issues, I thought we should spend a moment on that memo from Greenert and Odierno to the Secretary of Defense back from November 5th, 2014, because it uses nice bureaucratic language, but I think the message of this memo is pretty important and pretty daunting. The first sentence says, the growing challenges associated with ballistic missile defense are increasingly capable and continue to outpace our active defense systems. Admiral Syring just said that we will be overmatched 2020 unless we do things right. This kind of implies that we are being overmatched. And harsher language would say we're kind of losing right now. Later in the memo it says that our present acquisition-based strategy is unsustainable in the current fiscal environment. Unsustainable is a polite word for saying that we don't have enough money, this isn't fixable, and I don't know whether they meant to not only fix sequestration but go beyond that. But it also has a little bit of a tone here, at least vis-a-vis other military necessities, that they feel MDA is being something of a resource hog because y'all are getting money that they could use for readiness or other things, that needs that are not being met. So I don't want to read too much into this, but to have Greenert and Odierno write something like this is pretty astonishing because it's harsher criticism than the committee's ever levied. You throw this in with the recent GAO report talking about smaller issues, and we have a lot of work to do. I worry, for example, that lots of people talk, and we're underway looking at 4 East Coast sites, but will we have the money, the $3 or $4 billion to do those? Because we have to admit to ourselves that's a lower priority for MDA than discrimination of targets and redesigning the kill vehicle and things like that. So being straightforward here, we've got to not only fix sequestration, we've got to have a strategy that seems to work better against ballistic missile threats. And Greenert and Odierno talk about things like left of launch and non-kinetic means of defense. Lots of things that are strategic decisions that we need to make sure we're on top of, because just same old won't necessarily fix the problem. So we trust you, gentlemen. We hope it's working, but this is kind of a vote of no confidence here from 2 of the most important people in the military. So what do we do to best fix their concerns?
Sir, I was in the staff talks, Navy-Army staff talks that generated that particular lecture, and the fundamental issue from the services comes down to are we spending our money correctly, and what is the impact for the money that we are spending? The primary concerns that they have is that we're relying at this particular point, for whether it be ballistic missile defense for the homeland or theater ballistic missile defense, is that we're really emphasizing being a catcher and shooting a rocket down with a rocket, which is a very expensive proposition, and it drives low-density, high-demand assets, their operational tempo up. So when they talk about unsustainable, it's not only in the terms of cost, but it's in terms of the operational tempo of the forces that are doing it. And so what we really need is what they're asking for is a broader range, that we have a deterrence policy that helps keep missiles on the rail through deterrence. We have kinetic and non-kinetic options to keep missiles on the rails, and then we start attriting the threat once they get airborne, starting in the boost phase and throughout that particular flight, so that we start knocking down missiles in a more effective and a cost-effective manner. We're on the wrong side of the cost curve, and we're on the wrong side of the operational tempo curve, and that's what they're trying to drive for. That's why the impacts of sequestration are so critical, because Admiral Syring has laid in technological RDT&E money to go after other methods other than just the mid-course approach that will allow us to get on that correct side of the cost curve. And with sequestration, those will be impacted, which is counter to what the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the CNO have asked for, to go after, to get on the right side of the cost curve and also free up the operational tempo of the forces that are executing this critical mission.
Chief of Staff of the Army, not the Air Force, yeah.
Sir, if I could just add to that, I think that the Joint Staff and OSD is looking at a more holistic way of looking at global force management. And instead of just looking at platforms, whether it's BMD ships or THAAD or Patriot, how can we better address the COCOM's requirements in terms of capability? So that's where you get left of launch. That's where we need improvements in ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and being able to do a better job of seeing intent and taking actions before a launch. And also making use of other non-kinetic, whether it's space control assets, whether it's maybe directed energy down the road, things that are more cost affordable in terms of getting after this capability. So what we're doing is we're really raising the level of sophistication as to how we get after a global force management.
Mr. Cooper, I would just add two items that have been touched on as well. One is force structure with the Navy in terms of the combatant commanders being asking the CNO to provide more and more ships for the ship stations with EPAA, more and more, and I see that escalating over the next several years. CNO has and the Navy have other things for those ships to do in terms of sailing with strike groups and protecting the strike groups, and it's just I think you see the CNO saying that I don't have the assets in the future to cover all of the requirements from the combatant commanders around the world, and just asking for a new strategy in terms of how do we do that, how do we integrate left and right of launch, how do we move this into advanced technology and get on the right side of the cost curve, in his words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Admiral Gortney, we touched on the long-range discriminating radar, but could you amplify the importance of that for the warfighter?
Yes, sir. Sensors are key. If you can't see, you can't kill. And to the improvement for the long-range discriminating radar, our ability to better detect and discriminate where the threat is and the types will enhance the effectiveness, the lethality of our kill vehicles. But we also need to enhance the lethality of our kill vehicles, and we need to sustain them. So the priorities that Admiral Syring has laid out, the three priorities of the better sensors, enhanced kill vehicles, and the sustainment and maintaining of which we own have to be done concurrently. It's not an either or. All of them have to be done concurrently.
Privately, but directed energy. That's something, there's a bipartisan agreement that has tremendous potential for the future and is and should be part of our asymmetrical advantage as a country over people on the other side. So what are you doing to apply the benefits of directed energy?
Sure. There's two applications, obviously tracking in terms of what that might provide from a space-based solution with laser capability and the maturation of that technology. The other very important part of that technology maturation effort is what it may mean for us scaling up to a boost phase intercept capability. And two very promising development efforts ongoing with MIT and Livermore. Both have advantages and disadvantages. We've gone out to industry and asked their ideas in terms of how can we get technology to a demonstration sooner than later. And I think you'll see us pursue that path for really a down select in the 2018 time period to single up on one technology and one solution for tracking, and I'll just leave it at tracking in this forum, and boost phase intercept.
Okay. Thank you. And last,
as you can imagine, defense budget spending is a major issue on Capitol Hill right now. By way of example, I was just notified that in a few minutes I'm supposed to meet with the chairman and some other GOP House members about the Tom Price budget and the President's budget. We all understand the adverse effect the Budget Control Act of 2011 and sequestration has had on defense capabilities. I want to focus in a little bit different light the President's budget proposal versus the Tom Price budget proposal and how that impacts what you do. In that vein, the President has proposed a budget $561 billion for base national defense, $51 billion for overseas contingency operations, OCO, for a total of $612 billion. The Tom Price budget complies with the requirements of the Budget Control Act of 2011. Base national defense spending is at $523 billion, but as a sweetener, he adds $90 billion for the OCO, totaling $613 billion. So you've got $612 billion in total defense spending, President Obama, $613, a little bit more, Tom Price, but then you've got the base difference of $38 billion more under the Obama proposal, OCO $39 billion more under Tom Price. Shifting this money from base to OCO, how does that affect your commands and the programs that you oversee? And if we could just go from my right to left, General Mann first, Admiral Syring, and on down.
Thank you, Congressman. I would say that what is really essential is that we have some predictability and with our programs, so that we're able to work with our industry partners and provide a plan or a requirement that it is not subject to a lot of variability in terms of what the funding is going to be. So I would just leave it at the fact that predictability is key.
And which provides better predictability, the base or the OCO?
I think having more in the base would provide that predictability.
All right, thank you.
Sir, we've never at MDA spent or received OCO, and obviously in the base would be better for us unless there was some rule change that allowed us to do that in an efficient manner, but my preference, sir, would be in base.
So if I understand correctly, as OCO spending has been spent in the past, the additional sums going to OCO would have no beneficial effect for MDA.
As currently structured, that's correct, yes, sir.
There is, consistent with what we've stated, the adverse effect of money being in OCO as opposed to base. There seems to be an effort behind the scenes to free up OCO so that in effect we'd have one massive budget of $613 billion, and OCO funds could be used as base funds have been used in the past. Understanding that this would be novel, understanding that we would have to get the votes from somewhere to make this change in our laws. Would that affect your answers any?
Again, Congressman, I think, going back to my earlier point, I think predictability and the rules, the authorities surrounding those appropriations would be key. Whatever would give us that predictability that would limit the amount of variability, I think is what we're focused on.
Number one, directed energy. How much money is needed to advance directed energy research at the most rapid pace possible?
Sir, we're rapidly, we requested in this budget a significant increase in directed energy. We're requesting over $1.3 billion, both unclassified and classified funding, which is a several $100 million increase over last year's budget, and I think it's right in terms of the balance of those resources.
Thank you. The second question is, how much progress is being made on improving the reliability of current anti-missile interceptors? Do we have a reasonable chance of defending the United States today with the current inventory?
I'll answer the first part and then let Admiral Gortney answer the second part. The budget request that I've put forward and the additional funding for the GMD program is focused on reliability and improving reliability of the current fleet and the future fleet. And we believe we have the right balance between those two in terms of focusing on what we know about for the current fleet, improving the reliability of those that we're fielding, and then keeping the design going for the new one, which is the RKV, which will be tested well before it's fielded.
I have high confidence in the current system against the current threats. And I have that because of the way of the testing program that we have as we assess the threats that are out there that it's designed to go against, and our ability to test and exercise the system of systems that makes up this architecture. Should that change and I lose confidence, I'll be the first to tell you that I lost confidence in the system, but I do not have that here. And as long as we're able to properly fund the capabilities that we've asked for in the budget, and we are able to execute the testing and maintain the test schedule, and we have the intel to see if we're pacing the threat, I'm comfortable with it. But if it fails to do that, I'll come back and tell you.
This week is so crucial because what we're really talking about here is fixing a problem that will otherwise plague us for the next 7 years. So if we can get a better outcome now, we could be saving you gentlemen and your successors a 7-year nightmare here. So these talks, like Mr. Brooks was talking about with the chairman, this is a very important time for the military to weigh in very clearly.
Do we know how many votes are going to be in this?